So please welcome up on stage Aron Levin.
It's going down, y'all.
All right, where's the remote? There it is. Good song, Dilated People. That was a long time ago. All right, so hello. I'm going to skip the introduction. We're going to get right to it because we're a little bit short on time. Shortly, though, thank you, Adobe and the Adobe team for letting me get to go on stage and talk to you guys. This is going to be super fun. So we're going to talk about people today, and we're going to talk about the fact that people now have more publishing power than the world's most powerful traditional media companies had just 10 years ago. The big media powerhouses of tomorrow will be created by creative individuals with extraordinary influence in long-term niche verticals and groups of their core audience. So the question I've been asking myself that I'm going to ask you guys today is what happens when $600 billion in advertising spend shift from traditional media companies to a long tail of creative individuals. So we're going to dive into how brave brands turn this macro trend into their advantage as they engage with the creative community in a time when relatable and authentic content is more important than ever before. First off, though, I'm going to show you a short video. It's roughly 60 seconds, and I need you to pay attention because what I'm going to ask you to do is count the number of people that you may recognize in this video. So let's see if this thing works.
Watch me, nay-nay. Okay. Now watch me whip. Watch me, nay-nay. Do the stanky leg. Now I me yo. Now break your legs. Tell them break your legs. Okay. Now watch me whip. Now watch me, nay-nay. Now I me pop. Now watch me whip. Now I me do. Now watch me, nay-nay. Watch me whip. Watch me whip. Watch me whip. Watch me whip.
All right, pretty good, right? So, quick, sort of, not exercise, but quick poll. Some morning yoga or pre-lunch yoga, I should say. Could everyone raise their hands, please? A little bit of stretch might be good for everyone. All right, so keep your hands in the air. Keep your hands up. And as you watch this video, I want you to keep your hand up if you recognized one person in this video. Roughly half, maybe. Okay, so there's a couple of you recognize more than one, or one. How many of you recognize two people in this video? Keep your hand up. 3? Yeah, So, no person in this room recognized more than 3 people in this video. Wow, over there. You crazy. What's wrong with you? Everyone. Okay. So he's very popular. The interesting thing is that, might be an outlier or two, but the point is that whether you ask 10 people, 100 people, 200 people, 1,000 people, very few people tend to recognize more than, at most, a handful of people in this video. There are 15, 20 people here. It goes on for 7 minutes. The video, anyone knows what it is? No? You just know all the people. Yeah? Yeah, it's YouTube Year in Rewind 2015. We're going to pause at that and we're going to get back to that in a little while. We're going to start with macro trends and to provide some context. And I want to thank Tony for sort of doing the groundwork here so we don't have to spend too much time talking about this. This $600 billion, it's what the world spent on advertising last year. That's digital, analog, billboards, YouTube videos, Facebook, everything combined, roughly $600 billion. And 25% of that was spent on digital channels globally. So $150 billion. Took 20 years to get to that point for the advertising industry, roughly 20 years. And the industry sort of forecasts that within the next 3 to 4 years, that number is going to double. So, simply put, advertisers are going to spend more money on digital channels. And 70% of that will be spent on mobile. And as, if you were paying attention to Tony, it's simply put because that's where people spend their time. And that's, where advertising dollars tend to follow because brands want to reach their audiences. And as he pointed out, this is actually an old number, so I think his is even more precise. I had number 9%. I think it's probably close to 7%, and who knows where it will be in a couple of years from now. The point here is that people are not, the average consumer at least, are not spending time in the mobile web browser. But the thing is that as revenue, the $600 billion shift from analog to digital and from desktop to mobile, the same rules doesn't apply, the same format doesn't apply, because people, they spend their time elsewhere, and attention, where it flows, money tends to follow. So you may recognize most of these, but the interesting thing here is that only one of them were around and had any real traction just 4 years ago. Sure, Snapchat and Instagram and Messenger, they all existed, but no one were paying attention to the platforms. The point here is that within the next sort of 3 to 4 years, it's highly unlikely that this is where people will spend their time. And why that matters, I think, is because who, in the advertising industry, or, if you work for an agency or a brand, or if you're trying to figure out how to reach your, customers or people that matter to you, where are they going to be? They're probably not going to be on Snapchat in 4 years from now. That might be the hot thing right now. Facebook, sure, still relevant. Most likely people are going to watch YouTube videos. But the point is that it's going to be, made up of new platforms and new formats. We think it's likely to be centered around people. That's what these platforms all have in common. That's a pretty safe bet. Because, as I started off saying, people now have the same publishing power as the most powerful media companies in the world had, just 5 or at most 10 years ago. So, hence we sort of, believe that the future media powerhouse, it's not one place, it's hundreds of thousands of them, of creative individuals that have extraordinary influence in their specific audiences. And the thing is, it's not going to happen in 4 years from now, it's already happening. When you as, when we as marketeers go and talk to people, in the US, teen millennials specifically, and you survey them for influence. You ask them who they trust, who they think are approachable, who they have an emotional connection with, who they engage with, who they think is extraordinary. Top spots by online celebrities, not the traditional sort of Hollywood star. Johnny Depp doesn't do too well. I mean, older generation, sure, but new generation, the platform is sort of democratized. So the people you saw in this video, I'm not sure if these guys were there specifically, but that's who we were referring to. And the reason why, it's because they're more trustworthy. They're more like me, they're easier to relate to, they are more approachable, but at the same time, they're also 10 times more extraordinary. They are close to 20% more, 20 times more engaging, and there's the holy grail of media publishing or brand marketing. There's real emotional connection. And if you sort of deep dive even further, you learn that there's even more, they're even more approachable and trustworthy the further down you go in the sort of long tail. Anyone know who this is? Recognize the face? if you live in Stockholm or Sweden, if you're between, say, 17 and then 34 maybe, you're highly likely to recognize this person because 1.4 million people follow her. In her lifestyle, fashion, travel, even interior design. This is Kenza. She has 1.4 million followers. That's bigger than a lot of newspapers. Extraordinary publishing power. Not only the reach, but again, there's emotional attachment, there's engagement, people pay attention, there's trust. She's approachable because she's like me. But if you sort of extend and you look at the long tail, so I would bet like on this person any day of the week over, say, a traditional media powerhouse or a celebrity of traditional type. But I would also double down on the long tail because there's 36 people here. If you add them up, it's 1.4 million people. But they are even more trustworthy, relatable, approachable. There's even stronger emotional connection because they're even closer to me. And you see in the numbers that the engagement is almost doubled. So that's quite interesting. And again, it's because they have more influence because of these reasons. So it's getting more and more complex. What used to, you remember this guy? 14-year-old from Ontario, Canada, Justin Bieber, in front of his camera, web camera at YouTube. YouTube had, I think, around 20 million monthly active users at the time. That was enough for him to be recognized and become the sort of YouTube star of the year and the online creator of the year. Spotify today, 5 times bigger in monthly active users. YouTube, 1 billion people every single month. Even more probably. You remember this guy? You remember? Star Wars kid. And he was the online celebrity of, the year after. But this is where it gets more complex. Because this is what it looked like just last year. 150 people gathered in this video. Phenomenal production. Flew in people from, I think, like 30 countries and gathered this. These were the 150 most influential people online. So online creators. And there's hundreds of thousands of them. So you didn't even recognize the most famous ones. 150 superstars. I bet you that every single person, probably 10 times more influential than Justin Bieber at the time. Probably more. So the question is, like, as you're watching this and sort of reflecting upon the reality and the media landscape today, can you keep up? And you talk to people and, you survey people in this room. I can relate to this. Andrew Walker, top comment. He didn't recognize 90% of the people in this video. But the point is that you're not supposed to. That would be a little bit crazy. What's important, though, is that these people that you've just observed, these media companies of tomorrow and publishing platforms with their creative power, their fans, they worship them. Opening up on the first scene or first sort of shot of the video, this is Superwoman. How many people recognized her? One person. Couple. When she goes on tour, no paid promotion, just one video, 26 cities all over the world. This is what it looks like when she shows up to her hotel. You've never heard about her. And there's 150 of them that are the most popular ones, and there's hundreds of thousands more. Used to be weird subculture, maybe. People playing video games in front of his computer, live broadcasting to YouTube, fashion bloggers. It's not. So we think that the big media powerhouses of tomorrow, again, it will be created by these sort of people. Because, and here's the reason why, entrepreneurship and creative power, it's on its way to full democratization. What used to take full team, production, money, lawyers, you name it, one person. And sort of a history lesson, not to deep dive into the sort of history here too much, but back like 600 years ago, an economical shift happened. And what happened at the time in England was that Henry VIII, he introduced property rights to the farmers so that they could take care of their own land. He grew the economy with agriculture because that was what's sort of hindering economical growth at the time. But then as the kings went to war, well, of course it's highly simplified because there's still farmers, right? In Skåne or whatever, So it's highly simplified. But the point here is that 200 years ago, as the kings went to war, they had to pay their soldiers. You can't pay your soldiers with land, you need to give them capital. But the kings did not possess enough capital at the time. So they had to turn to bankers. This is Nathan Rothschild family, one of the most powerful families in the world. Why? Because they were Jewish, and the only people at the time that were allowed to borrow money were the Jews. So they borrowed money to the kings, which also meant that they dictated the terms to the kings. So bankers now had more power than kings. What used to take an army of 20,000 people, this guy, one letter, sign. He dictated on which terms the countries could go to war. And then came the knowledge workers and the modern day CEO. Because capital wasn't enough at the time. You had to build products and services and drive value. Today, at least I'd like to argue that what's going to drive economical growth is not 10 times more agriculture, 10 times more capital, or 10 times more knowledgeable workers. It's creativity and entrepreneurship. And as you've seen, and if you go back to agriculture, before that was the church and the Pope. So the kings ruled the popes, then came the bankers, the CEO. Today, it's made up of people and entrepreneurs on a democratized platform. So that's where we think that the $200 billion will end up. Some call this influence and marketing. Likely you've heard the term. You pay people to talk about your product. It's not as simple as that. This is about the future of building brand equity, and that's happening right now. So the question here, diving into specifically sort of the value of what we want to show you guys today is, how do you get the word out in this crazy and messy new world of online and marketing and content creation? We've seen that brand companies brave companies like H&M, IKEA, Uber, they're leading the way. There's multiple others as well. These are just a couple of examples. IKEA realized, anyone here from IKEA? No? IKEA realized that it doesn't look like the IKEA catalog in people's homes. They encourage influencers to share their IKEA style. But what ends up happening is that the Instagram feed looks like a modern-day IKEA catalog because they realize they're going to have to play by new rules. So they leverage interior designers and people that are influential in the sort of lifestyle home interior community. Here's another example, a little bit different one. H&M, more recently, I think you've seen this one. They are creating a cultural movement by actually attempting to change culture. Anyone from H&M here? A couple. Big round of applause to this. I think this is phenomenal. No? Give it up to these guys. Because this could not have been an easy decision. The reason why, you can't see this here, but 70% of the sentiment here, it's negative. Because it provokes and it forces people to take a stance. But the people that do get behind and sort of, go on their side, they become die-hard ambassadors. It's pretty powerful. And this, one of the most influential people in the US right now. And Samsung, after having spent years and probably hundreds of millions of dollars in launching their new flagship store in the US, on 837 Washington Street, they opened up a 6,000 square meter flagship store. How do you get the word out? You have to trust people, because at the end of the day, people are going to go there. There's not one thing to explore. There's not one thing to experience or talk about. There's thousands of things. So if you get people there to get the word out and talk to their audiences in a passionate and sort of authentic way. This is a campaign we did with her and like 50 other people that went there at the same time. You can't see it right here, but it's fully disclosed that this, I've been paid to go here. This is sponsored, but I'm also a big ambassador. This is real. You don't get to decide what's authentic. You don't get to decide like what's good and what like good content is and what's not. It's up to her audience, and it's up to her to sort of lead the voice in the campaign. And last, we're going to dive into how Uber actually replaced their Super Bowl campaign. This was a month and a half ago. They got hundreds of their most influential content creators that love their brand to sort of be the voice of their Super Bowl campaign. So I'm going to show you quickly what that looked like. Uber teamed up with Animal Planet at Super Bowl 50. So Super Bowl 50, it's been going on for 50 years. For the last 12 years, they've been running something called Puppy Bowl. It's precisely what it sounds like. It's Animal Planet. They get a bunch of puppies together, and they play football. Crazy American, thing, super popular, and highly relevant from a sort of cultural standpoint because everyone's paying attention to Super Bowl. So Uber decided to team up. It's magic formula, I think. You take some puppies, you put them in cars, you hook it up to Uber, you have people request, rides, cars show up with puppies, all the money from the campaign is donated to animal shelters. And if you see a puppy you like, you get a chance to adopt it and sort of bring it with you to your home. That's sort of a pretty nice campaign, I think. So what we did was we found 33,000 potential influencers in New York. We're a sort of data-driven company at its core. We took those, top 10%, right segment, those with the highest engagement. But here's the important part. We manually pick out those that are relevant for the Uber brand, and then we find those that are already fans of their product. That's the very core. Because then you can actually trust them. They can say whatever they want because they're going to say good things. You end up with 250 people that do this. It's pretty powerful. And what we learned was that authentic and native, content is very individual. We heard Nordic Choice talk about this before. I mean, what end up happening, we had, a set of pictures that you could use. Roughly half of the participants picked those, but the others, they sort of had their own, view of what, to your example, what a, puppy looks like, what a dog looks like. So we asked them to take a puppy selfie and describe what was going on in New York on that day. And what's interesting, even though you disclose this is a paid for promotion. They reached out and asked me if I could, help get the word out. The content is phenomenal when you trust people, when you let them use, because this, very much like a brand has their own guidelines. This woman here, influential lifestyle, person in New York, she has her own style. Same goes for this. It's up to her what looks good to her audience and what doesn't. It's up to her what's native and what's authentic. We don't get to dictate that. We thought we would because we had 30 pictures with different styles. And we said you can use one of these, put a filter on it or crop it, do whatever you want. Half of them yet ended up doing this. And the results are even better. This is pretty cool. Shows dedication. Sketch artist, And when you work with, influencers or the media powerhouses of tomorrow, as we like to refer to them as to, you're going to learn that what's native and what's real is very different. This guy, a Brazilian artist, he lives in New York, very influential in, especially among the women in New York City. This is what, is authentic and native to him. He had to take his shirt off. Can you guess which picture here yielded the highest engagement and attention? He never smiles. besides for that one picture. The point here is that you add these things up, you get people at scale, you get them to, in their creative process, decide what's native and what's authentic and what's real. The results are phenomenal. Same goes for H&M, IKEA, Samsung, and a couple of other brands that have figured this out. And within minutes, we had thousands of people engaging, sharing, tagging their friends. By the way, this is, a paid brand marketing campaign. You're not asking people to do this for free as a favor. Spend it very much like you buy advertising in a magazine or on TV or on YouTube or Instagram, wherever. The results are that when you coordinate this at great scale, you achieve some pretty phenomenal results. More attention than some of the stuff that were happening on Super Bowl. And what we learned was that the sponsored content, you wouldn't believe this unless you looked at the numbers, had higher engagement than the organic average. So this is advertising outperforming native content. When you play by the rules of these people, you get a lot of reach, you get a lot of engagement, but more importantly, you engage and support your biggest brand ambassadors. You believe in their creative power. And the result for this specific campaign, half of all the reach in media came from this audience. This was pretty, compared to other ways you buy advertising, small group of people. Phenomenal reach, high relevance, content looks great. So the question and sort of closing thoughts here to you guys, you probably work for, a lot of you work for consumer brands, you work for agencies, you have clients, you might have partners. The question is who your most influential brand ambassadors are, how you find them, engage them, get them on board, and pull off what we've just seen. So I'm not going to pitch you guys to work with us, but hit me up to find out, because we've had a look at some of the companies that are here today, and it looks pretty good. A lot of interesting consumer brands, a lot of agencies with phenomenal clients. Take a picture of this, send me an email. Maybe we'll, get together and find something out. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.